Okay, so it's that time of year where I start to talk about and certainly really think about what cars I'm going to bring to the Vintage Offroad Nationals this year. This is for the 2023 Vintage Offroad Nationals. And I'm going to be racing in the same 5 classes I always race in, which is Classic, Classic 4-wheel drive, Stadium Truck, 2-wheel drive, and 4-wheel drive buggy. So let's get straight to it. For Classic, we'll start all the way in the back. I'm actually going to bring 2 cars. We have the Traxxas Rad 2 and the Tamiya VQS. The reason I'm bringing 2 is, at this point, I can't really decide which one I want to run. The Rad 2 I did run a couple of years back, and I only qualified second because I didn't have a very good setup for the car. And by the time I got to the main, the motor burnt out, so I couldn't even run the main. So I feel kind of bad that I couldn't have a really good weekend with that car. So I've fixed most of the setup issues I had with this car since then. So I think it'll be much better on the track now. Not perfect, but much better. And I'd just like to try it. Maybe I'll run it for one qualifying round, or, well, first I'll start an open practice, see how it does. If I feel comfortable with it, then maybe I'll do a qualifying round with it. The VQS, as you probably know by now, I love 4-wheel drive buggies more than anything else. So I'd like to try the VQS out. In the past, I was running my Tamiya Dirt Thrasher, and then last year I ran my Kyosho Laser Alpha. Both of those are fantastic cars. The Dirt Thrasher I've won enough times in that, as much as I love it, I want to try something new. And the Laser Alpha, the way that I have it modified right now is outlawed, so I can't run it at all. VQS is kind of an interesting car. I've always wanted to run an Avanti style chassis. The very first year I ran at Vonats, in the 4-wheel drive buggy class with the 10.5 brushless motors, I ran a re-release 2011 Tamiya Avanti. It went very poorly. That car was just a bag of ass on the track. But I figured something with an egress geometry would be a bit better. The shocks are a bit more stand-up on the front. The rear suspension is also much smoother than what it was on the Avanti in terms of how the shocks compress. There's much less bind. So I think the VQS will actually perform very nicely on the track. And that big neon yellow antenna tube there does not have an antenna in it. I just put the antenna tube there because I think it looks really cool. So that will be my primary choice, but I'm very open to playing around with the Rad 2, and we'll see how that goes. Stadium truck for me is very simple, the Kyosho Pro XRT. I do have other options, but this is my favorite so far. The other options I have that I have run over time, the Kyosho Outlaw Rampage Pro mid-motor electric truck, that did very well 2 years ago when I ran it at Vonats. It felt very good, but I feel like the Pro XRT is a bit more tunable. I can get a lower ride height on it, which is more relevant now since RC Excitement has their indoor track is like a sealed dirt surface, which is much higher grip. And I think that even if I had the mid-motor truck, because of the way the truck is made, I can't quite get to as low of a ride height, and I think that'll end up hurting me despite the fact that it's a mid-motor truck. This is a bit more tunable for higher grip, so I think this will do better. I could run something more conventional like the RC10 GTE, which I've run a bunch of times, or my 10T. I have a 10T2 that I've never tried. I'd like to try that one year. But I also have a Losi XXT, which I just haven't got to really putting together. So for now, the Pro XRT, I really enjoy running that truck. So I'm going to bring that. Moving forward to Classic 4-wheel drive, I will run my Yokomo 92 Works YZ10. Other cars that I've run in that class were the Kyosho Laser ZX-RR. I've run that a few times. And what else? The Schumacher Cat 2000 I ran a few years ago. And then, let's see, what else did I run? Oh, the Yokomo 93 Works. The 93 Works, when I ran it, was good, but not great. And I made changes afterwards to improve the car for RCE. But between that and the 92 Works, I think the 92 Works will do better primarily because the shock towers I have on this have more adjustment holes. So I have 3 holes on the front and also 3 on the rear that'll give me a better range of roll center and camber gain tuning options. And in general, the geometry on the 92 works between the shock tower mounting points for the camber links and for the shocks. I think will be better for higher grip tracks. So I'm going to use the 92 works. The 93 works is probably better for something a bit bumpier, like, an outdoor dirt track. I think it can do okay on hard packed dirt, but I think this will do better. And why not run the Laser that I ran last year? That's a wonderful car. I love running it, but I want to force myself to do new things. So 92 works for this year. For 4-wheel drive buggy, I got 2 cars I'll be bringing. I have the Kyosho Laser ZXS Evolution. I brought this last year to kind of test it out. And it's, again, one of those many cases where I've made improvements to it since the last time I ran it. The main issue I had with this car last time was I was running gear diffs on the premise that they'd be more reliable. And I thought that I figured out a way to tune them, but it turns out that the method I had used to try to tune those gear diffs, which are not sealed, they're open gear diffs, it only led to more bind in the diffs, and that led to very inconsistent handling. So I didn't like that. So I put ball diffs in this, and I also played around with the lay shaft to try to lock down the center front pulley. When I was running it last year, I found that always loosening up. So I think I put some spring washers in there to really add some tension to the lock nut to really lock down the center pulley. So this should do much better this year. So my front up plan is to run the ZXS Evo and give it a proper weekend to really race it well. And then I'll be bringing the Losi XX4 that my friend Mark made for me. Basically, if the Laser does poorly or if I have issues with it, I'll default to the XX4. So we'll see how they do in open practice. If I break this thing a lot, or if there are any issues, I'll go to this. Now the XX4 is also a kind of a fragile car. If anything, it's more fragile than the Laser, but it's dynamically very good. If anything, though, as I look more closely at the 2 cars, the Laser is actually a bit more tunable. So I'm thinking the Laser might be a bit better on that track, but we'll see. I do want to try the XX4 at least during open practice just to get a feel for it. I've run a Losi 22.4 a bunch of times when I used to race modern stuff more often, so I'm pretty familiar with the general driving style of the chassis. But anyway, those are the 2 choices. I've thought about bringing my 95 YZ10 as a backup option, which is the same thing I did last year, and I ended up running that car in qualifying and the mains because everything else I had at the time wasn't working well for me. But if I brought that this year, I'd end up defaulting to it anyway because I'm very comfortable with that car. And it's a very strong car, but I really want to give these 2 a proper shot. So that's 4-wheel drive buggy. For 2-wheel drive buggy, this is the hardest one for me to make a good decision on because I have a lot of 2-wheel drive buggies. Several RC10s between the RPM Worlds conversion, the Tekin mid-motor, the conventional Worlds car. I have also Losi XX, which again I haven't really gotten to building properly. And then on the Kyosho side, I have these 3, the Triumph, the Pro X, and the Rampage Pro E mid-motor. I would like to make one of these rear motor cars work. Last year I ran the Pro X, at least I tried very hard to make this work, and I was having all kinds of issues with the car understeering on the wide sweeper on the back, sort of left-hand side of the track. And since then, I added some weight to the front, and I also realized that the rear suspension arm block was giving me 5 degrees of rear toe. 5 degrees of rear toe in will give you a bunch of rear grip, but it's also going to make it very hard to corner. So I swapped that out for the 3-degree block. It's a 3 or a 2, something like that. That should help a corner a lot better. Between that and the weight up front, I think this will do much better. So I'm hopeful in that sense but we'll see how it does on jumping performance, because I did notice last year that I did have some issues if I landed a bit off center on jumps. It had a tendency to not like that too much. So we'll see if some of the changes I made make it less nervous on off center landings. If it is, then there's the Triumph. With the Triumph, I didn't have to make a whole lot of changes since last time. I added a bit of weight to the front, again, to get more steering, because this was also pushing a bit around that wide sweeper. And then on the rear, I had to find a good window for the rear shocks for damping, because it didn't quite have enough pack to keep the rear end from slapping. And if I stiffen everything up, then it had too much pack. So I played some games with custom drilling holes in the shock piston to try to get to a decent window for damping. It's probably not perfect, but I think it's better than what it was last year. So we'll see how that goes. And I also made some changes to the drivetrain itself. Last year I ran the stock spur gear, which was the same, I think it's a 100-tooth spur gear that you get with the Laser. This uses the same lace shaft as the Laser uses. And that's the only size spur gear that they made for that, which really restricted the pinion gear sizes you can use, because that spur gear is so large that when you mount the motor and try to put a bigger pinion on it to make up for that huge spur gear, you can barely fit anything. So what I did instead is I have, what is it? I think I used a Pro X or a Rampage Pro slipper hub on the inside, which does mount on this lay shaft. If I remember correctly, I played some game with that to basically allow me to mount a 48 pitch spur. Sorry, let me rephrase. The inner hub is the same hub. I didn't change that, but the outer hub that the spur gear mounts onto, I think that's a Pro X hub. And then I played some funky game with slipper pads to get it to work, because the slipper pads that were used on the Laser, it's a special type of pad that locks into the spur gear. And the slipper hub itself has a certain size to accommodate that pad. On the Pro X, that slipper hub is a different size. So essentially you got to take like a hex or an octagon style slipper pad and kind of make it fit in there. So it's a bit of a custom job, but it does allow me to get to a lower final drive ratio, which would be really good for a stock motor. So these two will get priority for my Friday open practice testing to see which one really works better. If I'm struggling with either of them, I'll just go to this guy, the mid-motor Rampage Pro E. I've run this a few times and I know it works well, so for me it's a known quantity. So at the very least, I will have a backup option that I know is very good and I won't have to really worry at all about. So that's kind of where I am. It's going to be 9 cars to bring, which is a lot. But since I'll be traveling alone this time because my son is in school, I can't bring him along. So I have the whole car to myself to pack all my stuff. I can bring some more cars and do some more experimentation. That also means I got to pack more spare parts and bring more stuff, but that's okay. Let's see, what am I most excited about this time around? It's hard to say. There's a lot of new stuff that I'm bringing here. The only known quantities are the Pro XRT and the Rampage Pro E. Everything else, I've run it either a little bit or not at all. And the little bit that I did run them was with a prior setup that wasn't optimized. So there's going to be a lot here to look forward to. The big thing with this event, especially this year, is that the main races, your 2-wheel drive buggy, your stadium truck, and your 10.5 turn 4-wheel drive buggy are going to be on Saturday, which means that on Friday, you have to focus most of your practice on getting ready for Saturday. In the past, they ran the easier classes, like the Classic and the Classic 4-wheel drive, on Saturday. This time they're flipping it around. The reason for that is so we can hopefully get 3 qualifiers in, I believe, and have more racing time on Saturday for the big classes, if you will. But that means a bit more pressure on Friday. So I have to have a really solid plan going on Friday for open practice. Got to have everything ready to go, all the batteries charged, which is what I normally do anyway, and have a plan for exactly which cars I'm going to do first. I know the Pro XRT is going to be fine, so I'm not too worried about that. The key thing will be starting off with two-wheel drive buggy, figuring out which of those will work best for me, and then after that, doing four-wheel buggy. And then once I sort those out, then I can start playing with the other stuff with the remaining time that's left. Because on Sunday, all I have to worry about is the classic four-wheel drive buggy and the classic class. And I don't think I'll need too much tuning for those. It's generally a lower stress class, for me at least. So I'm not too worried about tuning those. It's going to be really these 5 cars right here that I'm going to focus on. And the first one out will probably be the Pro X, because that's the one I would like to be able to use for two-wheel buggy as my primary option. It's a very cool buggy, so I really want to try to make it work. So I'll go from that to the Triumph, back and forth until I feel good with one or both of them, and then maybe the Rampage, and then four-wheel buggy. And then after that, maybe I'll do the XRT just to make sure that it works well on the higher grip track, and then we'll go from there. So that's enough talking for now, just to give you a sense of what my game plan is, and we'll see how it goes. So it's about a month out. I still have a little less than a month out. I got a few weeks left to pack and plan, but that's it for now. Thanks for watching.